What are the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence over an extended period of time?
All right, Neal. So great to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. As I told you, my daughters are fans of TikTok. I'm on TikTok, and all of a sudden, this guy pops up with a black sheet behind him, looking directly into my eyes. There it is, directly into my eyes, telling these amazing stories. And so my first thought was, I got to talk to that guy. So welcome. It's great to have you here on the Learning Leader Show.
Thanks, Ryan. It's very nice of you to have me. I really, really love what you do.
I think the skill of telling compelling, concise stories is near the top of the list of importance for leaders. And I also think this is an area where a lot of us struggle. So the purpose of our time today is to help instruct leaders how to become better storytellers, how to think of the ideas, how to weave them in naturally, how to make it a part of your regular routine to think of stories, to craft them, to create them, and then to share them with their team. So that's what I hope we can do today by way of having you share some stories and then deconstruct the process for how you do it. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's start with a story. Are you okay if I pick one?
By all means, yeah.
Okay. How about a fun one? The EQ of the gym bro. The reason I'm picking this one, I'll give you a second to think about it. The reason I'm picking this one is I go to the gym every day, and you made me rethink how I treat others in the gym, especially the people who you can tell it might be their first time in a while or their first time ever. And it made me think of being a kinder, more inclusive person, but doing it in a way that maybe people don't think. So can you tell the story of the EQ of the gym bro?
Yeah, so that's a true story, as most of my stories are very much based in truth. So I'm an early riser. I love to get to the gym nice and early. I'm very partial to the people that are there because, if you go to the gym regularly, especially if you're there at like 5:30 in the morning, it's the same people. It's the same crew.
Yep.
And what's nice about that is everybody's super respectful of each other, and and everybody knows what everybody else's sort of routine is, right? And so there's a kind of a sweetness, if you will, to the people that are there. Even the guys that are just yoked, they're sort of really good natured, and not at all the way that the reputation is out there in the world, right? I mean, it's they're more gentle than you might think, even as they're throwing the steel plates around. So anyway, one day, around about 6 o'clock, in comes this gal, and she's a little heavy set, and you can tell from the way that she's looking around, she hasn't been there in a while. Now, when I say a while, I mean she probably hadn't spent much time in the gym, maybe in a couple of years. And what then happened was this. As she's sort of confused and not quite sure what to do, one of these guys that was really yoked, just jacked, gets her attention, and he waves her over, and he asks her to spot him while he's doing bench presses. And he's got a chunk of weight on there, he's got some 45s on either sides. And so she's like, okay. So she gets under the bar and he starts banging out reps, and then he gets to failure. And I mean, this is the part of the story I love best, which is he trusted her enough to go right to the edge, right?
Yeah.
And he's at failure, and he starts to strain, and he goes, I can use your help. And so she's a big gal, right? So she just goes, and she bangs this thing back onto the rack. And you can see he was like impressed, that it wasn't like she was, no, she jacked it. So he gets up and he gives her a high five. Now, I can't hear what they're saying, but I could tell that he was like, he had engaged with her and so forth. And then he starts like pointing out stuff. So I knew what was happening was that he was showing her where everything was. And here a minute ago, when she came in, she was uncomfortable and unsure about where to go. And now here she has this guide. And the thing was, if you really break it down, what was so great about the way this guy did it was he didn't creep on her. He didn't go up to her like you might, in a bar and say, hey, come here often. He didn't do that. He didn't say, hey, do you need some help? Which would have been maybe possibly condescending. What he did instead was he asked her to help him. And so she's got a very clear idea of what to do. And she feels good that I'm being helpful. And so her first exposure to the gym is it's an accessible, welcoming place where people ask each other for help, right? So what it does is it gives her permission to ask somebody else for help, because that's what they do here, right? Now, I didn't miss any of that because I'm kind of in the persuasion business, and I knew what he was doing. So in the lockers, I said to him, hey, I saw what you did there. That was pretty clever. And his remark to me, honest to God, his remark to me is, well, I guess I'm more than a pretty face. And his remark did something else to me, which is, because he was so yoked, he often gets mistaken for being superficial or one-dimensional. So for somebody else to acknowledge, like, I see how sophisticated you are about this whole thing. You know how smart Arnold Schwarzenegger is? He's quite a brilliant guy. And he's down to earth, but he's super smart. And I've noticed that a lot of guys in the gym are like that. You can't judge a book by its cover. So the whole story was kind of about this, how you can't, that the gym is the kind of strange place for being open and a good place to go to, not just to get worked out, but it's a community. Yeah. And I just love that.
It makes you rethink of ways to making people feel welcome or a part of the team. So I think of, like, let's say the corporate world, and somebody's brand new. It's their first couple of days and they're nervous, or they're at their first ever conference where most people know each other. Oh, hey, they're hugging, they're laughing, right? And this person's brand new and they don't know. Think of ways, creative ways to make them feel a part of it without patronizing them, without being condescending, right? He could have went up to me like, oh, looks like you don't know what you're doing. So over there's the ellipticals there. And the girl feels even worse about herself. And instead, he brought her in. He trusted her. He led with trust, maybe more so than he should have, but he did it. And now all of a sudden, within 5 minutes, this person who's brand new, who's uncomfortable, who maybe might leave and never come back, which would be a shame. And because of him, now she feels probably at home. She probably got a great workout, feels good, goes home, and who knows?
Oh, she's coming back.
Yeah.
For 100%, she's coming back. But, and you know this probably from your experience, which is when somebody shows up at the gym and they're heavy, or it's clear that they haven't worked out for a while, they might be thinking, gee, I feel very self-conscious. But most of the gym rats are going, good for you, right on. It takes some doing to get in here. The first step is the tough one. You made that. So they have respect for that. I know that's my reaction. It's like, hey, man, you're here. They ain't. So you're one of us. And what you were saying a second ago about there's a great way to get somebody who's uncomfortable or new oriented to the system. And that is to ask them for help. Get them involved in helping you. And it's paradoxical, but that to me is it makes them feel useful, and it automatically makes them part of the team. And I guarantee
help
I have seen that gal, now that I mentioned it. I've seen her.
Yeah.
I've seen that gal back at the gym. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, when you have a new person, help them get an easy win, get a quick win, get one on the board. It could really change the arc of that person's experience. And so, while you learn this from the EQ of the gym bro, and I open with a story for a reason, because one, this is what you do. You tell stories to a camera right in front of your face. But there's a lot of learnings from every single story. I encourage people, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or wherever you go listen to or watch these things, there's so many life lessons. I start immediately deconstructing your storytelling process, thinking, how could leaders use this? But I want to keep oscillating back and forth between the actual stories and having you tell them, and then the deconstruction of the process so that we can become better communicators. So thinking about that, let's say somebody is a mid-level manager within a company and they have Monday morning meetings, whether they're on Zoom or in person, regardless of that. And most people dread those things. But every once in a while, you find one of those managers who has awesome meetings. And usually, and I'm thinking of one of my favorite bosses named Brian Miller. He would open these town halls or the meetings with an amazing story. And sometimes it seemed like it would have nothing to do with all of us in the crowd or all of us in the meeting room. And then he would find a way to tie it back to our life or our business. And there's a reason that I remember Brian Miller's name and I talk about him all the time. And I think one of the big parts, one, he was a very caring and loving person, but also he told amazing stories. I have had a lot of bosses. I don't remember all of them, or at least not fondly like I do him. And so I'd love for you, if you could, Neal, to talk about just your overall philosophy and thought process when it comes to telling stories, and maybe a few tips here as far as how others who maybe think they're not good at this, or maybe they're just not at all, could get better at this really important skill of telling good stories.
I lived in Los Angeles for a long time, and the Comedy and Magic Club in Hermosa Beach used to have this thing where you could go there. They used to have a bar where people would wait before the doors opened so they could go get their seats. And they would run two shows a night, weekdays. And they also had this great deal where you could go in there and get a baked potato and a steak and a beer, I think for something like about $5. This is a long time ago. But I was such a regular for that meal that the bartender got to know me. And he would let me stay in the bar and watch the closed circuit when they'd let everybody else into the seats. And so I would watch 2 shows a night, generally 3 nights a week. And what happened was you would watch the way that some comedians, it was exactly the same routine, exactly the same way every time. And then some comedians, you could watch them tuning it up. You could see the first show and you could see the second show, and you could see the difference. And the bartender, who was a wannabe stand-up, he would tell me like what they had done differently. And he could tell when the jokes had landed and so forth like that. And so that was a kind of masterclass for me. It wasn't unintended, but it was, to me, a really good example of, look, if you really want to get good at storytelling, just find some stand-ups you like and just watch them on YouTube or pull them out on TikTok. And you're going to find out how incredibly sophisticated they are at creating a kind of 3-act structure, right? And I saw Van Neistat the other day. He's a terrific YouTuber. And Van, he literally gave a kind of a little tutorial on how to tell a great story. And his first point was, every story needs a kind of element of mystery, like a reveal. It needs to have something at the end where people go, oh. And the example that he provided was, his son had been quite ill and had gone to the hospital. And naturally, he was very tense. And he was so on edge that he was visibly disturbed in the hospital waiting room. And this very nice woman says to him, I guess it's tough being a father, huh? And he looks up and it's Whitney Houston. And he says, now, true story, but he goes, let me tell you that story the way my wife would have told it, which would have been, I was in the hospital and Whitney Houston was there. And then she would follow with a bunch of details. She'd blown the story because she hadn't left the most peculiar or most interesting part to the end. Instead, she'd blown the punchline. And then all details that follow after are of no consequence. They don't mean anything. They're not tethered to a structure nor an arc. And you'll notice, Ryan, that in my own videos, they always end on some kind of moral, so that even if the story doesn't really have a hard charging ending, it resolves. It resolves with what I want you to take away with. I intend for every one of those videos, in fact, in every presentation I give, I intend for it to be a gift. I want to give you a gift. Now let's go back to your guy that you loved doing these meetings, and he would start with a story. What he was doing, Ryan, every time was he was giving people a gift. And they would take it that way. They would look forward to the beginnings of the meetings. Well, why is that powerful? Well, nobody's late. They don't want to miss the story, right? And the story might be on theme, right? It might wind up being important to great stand-up comedians, the really great ones. Their act usually ends where it began. Like they'll usually reference some crazy thing from the beginning, and then you'll go, oh, got us. Good. That's a great close. That was a strong end. And so somebody like you or me, that's done it for a while, we've got our 10,000 hours. We're trying to do that.
Yep.
We're trying to bring that meeting in on the same note that it started on, so that everybody feels like, wow, they have a sense of completeness. It made a circle, and a circle is going to be the most perfect of all the story endings. You'll sometimes notice in movies, the opening shot is really key to understanding the ending. And like in the movie Sexy Beast, the whole movie starts with a guy poolside in Spain, just baking in the sun. He's doing this little monologue. And out of absolutely nowhere comes a 14-ton rock rocketing down a hillside, apparently going to squash him like a bug, misses him by microns, and lands in his swimming pool. Well, at the very end of the movie, after this tremendous drama, at the very end of the movie, he has killed and buried his nemesis under the swimming pool. So in other words, the very first shot, the opening sequence, was a preview symbolically of the very end. And that when anybody does that, you like in a meeting or in a presentation, you go, oh, there's a pro. That's a pro.
Does your mind now naturally think of to tell the story where you save the punchline and the person was Whitney? Do you? Yeah. Does that, like, how do you? Because I think most people would tell it the way his wife was, as he said, right? They, oh my God, we went to the hospital.
Because they want to get it out.
Right. So what are maybe some thoughts or ideas or mindsets for people to think about so that they don't blow the punchline? They actually almost subconsciously learn how to better tell the story, because I think maybe it's reps. I'm not sure. I'm just curious. What do you think? And for you, do you find yourself not blowing punchlines because you're a pro? Like, I'm talking everyday life, random stuff with family, friends, things like that. I'm curious how you think about this.
Well, what's happened is, and it's partly because of the whole TikTok thing and the YouTube videos that I do, is that I'm wandering through life now with my radar up.
Always noticing things, moments. The Seth Godin, like, professional noticer.
There you go.
Yeah.
And it's something I've been doing lately. And I find, Ryan, it gives me a lot more joy to, my father said something years ago to me, and he was trying to say to me, pay more attention. And the way that he put it was, he said, life doesn't come with theme music, Neal. You're never going to know when you've met the love of your life. Nobody's going to signal you with music that the guy standing behind you in the ATM lawn's about to, boost your pocket. It's not like that. Life, you have to pay attention to see these moments when they happen. And so what, in response to your question about, like, how do I instinctively tell stories this way? I don't think that there's a story. I don't think it's worth telling a story or citing an anecdote or describing something that happened to you without some kind of important conclusion at the end. Like, hey, we went to the market today and we picked up salad, and lettuce and tomato. Okay, great. But maybe there ought to be something relevant about why you're even beginning this sentence. Generally speaking, the way I tend to tell stories now is to begin with a kind of vague suggestion that there's a message here by the time I get to the end. I'll give you an example. I just shot a video last night. I wanted to make the point, Ryan, that people need to shut up about their opinions when they don't really know what they're talking about. And I came across this great quote from Mark Twain, and it said, never miss an opportunity to shut up. And the way I start the video is by saying, if I was the commissioner of the NFL and I could make one rule that you couldn't change, it would be that on every kickoff of every NFL game, some random person from the stands has to come down and play on the kicking team And if you make the tackle, you get $1 million. But if you don't, whatever happens, happens. If you lose a body part, that's on you. No lawyers and no crying. And that what would happen is when after every kickoff, some suburban dad who's overestimated himself gets carted off on a stretcher, America might learn something. Okay. And then the rest of the story happens. But what happens is when you start with that beginning, they're like, what the hell? You know, they're what they will then do is they're using the rest of the story to try to figure the puzzle out. Right. And then when you get to the very end, they go, okay, got it. And so I'm trying at the beginning of these things usually to create some sense of anticipation and discomfort. Like, what the fuck was that for? Sorry for swearing. Oh, but
no, you're the guest. I never would censor. One of the things about your stories too that I notice you don't do that I think is a pro aspect of it is you have those friends who come up to you who do this. They go, Neal, this is the funniest thing that ever happened. Just wait. And you set this You set this expectation that is not reachable. And then they tell the story. It's not really that funny. And then it was a dud. And you're kind of like, what are we doing here? So like, don't ruin the stories. Don't ruin the moments by doing that. Yet it's still, you'll notice it happens all the time because I think they want you to pay attention to them, I guess, but as opposed to just launching into the story. You know what I mean?
Right. It is a rookie move. And Steve Martin makes this great point that he says that he cannot stand stand-up comedians to get up in front of a room and say, how's everybody doing? He says, what a waste of a smashing beginning. You know, you can get out there and Howie Mandel has one of the most legendary first lines in all of stand-up comedy, which was he came out in front of the audience. He didn't say anything for like 30 seconds. He's staring at the audience, but it wasn't staring at the audience with the air of somebody nervous. It was staring at the audience out of a kind of weird preparation, like he was looking for the perfect moment. And then he said, what happened was somebody laughed, and he goes, wait, don't laugh, that throws me off. I'm thinking, oh my God, that's so great that that he would have built the first line to be off of the nervous response of the audience. So in other words, the whole minute was a bit right from the very beginning. By the way, I committed the very sin I said I wouldn't commit, which was I started that story by saying, oh, Howie Mandel had the most awesome beginning. Oh,
rookie
Jesus,
move, dude.
Better be good.
The one thing
Brian,
I noticed,
you're teaching me.
I was watching your TED Talk. I believe it was from 2010.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're 12 years ago. And
I think it aged well, actually.
What's that?
I think it aged well, actually.
I do, but here's the thing that I noticed that I want to bring up to you that is evident, a trait that I want us to think about how we can earn, okay? When you pull out the duct tape, the crowd kind of gives you this response as like, what? And you responded with, I think, just a strong sense of comfort in your own skin, which comes across as being very confident. So the word I want to focus on now is confidence. I think a lot of people struggle with this, especially when they're getting ready to go up in front of a group of people. Where does your sense of confidence come from?
So I'm in the middle of an evolution on that.
Okay.
So I don't know that confidence is an extremely attractive trait, and
Yes.
it will win people over because confidence gives them reassurance and confidence that everything's going to be okay. And that's a great thing. However, where I'm at now is that authenticity, genuineness is the more important quality. And what I mean by that is a sense that you're not trying to sell anybody anything, and you're not trying to get over on anybody, and you're merely there to try to help. Or more simply, you are there to share the human experience with people. And I don't intend to get up here and flash my Rolex and flex on you about how great I am. I am driven a little bit crazy by the number of people on YouTube or TikTok, well, telling you how to do this or how to do that, and they brag about, how much money they make, which I find repulsive for a variety of reasons. Our role in life is, let's think of it from your context. You're trying to help people out to be better leaders. Mm-hmm. And in our short exchanges and conversation, I've already got the vibe of where you're coming from, which is a leader isn't a leader in order to get money or amass power. A leader is to facilitate people's best work experience. A leader's role is to help people do the best job they can do, to find the greatest level of satisfaction. For us to go through this human experience and come out the other end, loving each other, earning our self-respect, and a series of other dividends that comes from trying to share a good experience. Okay, so when you're standing up in front of a room, I don't know that you ever have to consider your level of confidence. Think only of this. How can I help these people? What could I do that would benefit them? So that when I stand up in front of them, I'm not worried about looking nervous or sounding nervous. I'm not worried about anybody thinking of me as a big shot. I'm only worried about them taking away something that might help them. If I do that, I won't have to worry about confidence. Hey, let me give you a hypothetical. Mm-hmm. Okay. I want you to pretend that you've got this person who has just won $10 million from some contest that they entered. And your job is to go up to them and give them the check for $10 million. Now, it really doesn't matter whether they're a beautiful woman or a powerful man or a homeless person. It doesn't matter. You're going to be equally not nervous because you get to deliver such good news, right? You're not going to fumble for words. You're not going to worry if you do fumble for words. You don't care. You're just there to deliver the good news. So what happens is if you legitimately think you're bringing value, and I'm going to assume that you've done all of the work you need to in order to get up in the room and try to deliver value, you have nothing to apologize for. You have nothing to be nervous about. I mean, yeah, if you're nervous, it's okay. It's forgivable. You're helping them out. If they can't deal with a little bit of your nerves, then that's too bad. You may have experienced yourself, Ryan, where every once in a while you'll be telling a story or you're delivering some line or something and you get emotional. And you feel compelled to apologize for having gotten emotional. But all that is it's evidence of how real you are. Mm-hmm. It's just evidence that you were for real and you were here. And so we've all done it. And I've stopped apologizing for do that. I'll sometimes when I'm talking about my father and my daughter, my dad never met my daughter and vice versa. And that's one of the great things I wish hadn't happened. I wish he'd met her. And I will get emotional talking about that. And I used to feel very self-conscious about it. But now it's just, that's what happens because it was meaningful to me. And this feeling no compulsion to apologize anymore means I'm sort of evolving away from trying to project confidence towards just trying to add value.
Your tagline is there's nothing wrong with us that can't be fixed by what's right with us. Where does that come from?
Well, that's from Bill Clinton. I thought, when I tell people that, they sometimes, they split into two halves of the audience, I'm sad to say. Some that despise him and some that love him. But the sentiment for me was really heartfelt for this reason, that people reckon that the way that we're being divided as a culture is professionals and algorithms and news that sensationalizes disaster because they know that will keep you watching. It's having a bad effect on us. It's having the effect of making us all feel like it's hopeless and that the only lifeline is to watch more of the news or to wander into the world and be just as negative as what we got back, just to reflect that negativity and feel victimized, perpetually victimized, like, oh, everybody's against me. I'm surrounded by idiots. I'm surrounded by people that are trying to change my world. Well, that's not been my experience. My experience is pretty good. Like that people open doors for me and I open doors for other people. and people return the phone that I dropped, and people open, and that guy in the gym, like, great example. Just the everyday sweetnesses of people. They are all around you. They are abundant. The number of good things that happen versus the number of bad things is in the hundreds of thousands to one.
Mm-hmm.
And yet people fixate on the one.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of borrowing library that I saw. And it was a sort of thing where people had just put books out in a neighborhood, and they put it in a little tree trunk, and it was very charming. It was wonderful. And, you could pull a book out, you can put a book in, and it was a little community thing. And then somebody had taken a picture of it because somebody like thrown cat food in it, to wreck it. Okay, here's the problem. You think that people are terrible because some douche canoe came along and threw cat food on it. What you're ignoring is that thing was up for months, and thousands of people came by, and nobody did that.
Mm.
Of course, somebody's going to do that. Okay, you clean it up and you move on because it's so rare. Don't stress. It's all, you're not taking into account all the times that it was just out there being used by regular cool people. So there's nothing wrong with this. It can't be fixed by what's right with this. To me, is just reframe. Just reframe. Look, we're going to get through this. Be sweet to people, because you're getting treated with respect 100 times a day. You're just not conscious of it because it's so common.
Yeah. Speaking of a sweet person, I believe this was earlier in your career. We're going to story time. You worked for someone, and I don't think you had any nice suits, but you needed to have a nice suit or two. And this gentleman, I'm going to have you tell it, but I'll introduce it to let you get your mind ready. This gentleman told you to go get some nice suits, then he would pay for it and expense it. Take it from there. I'd love to hear this story. This is about power. This is about how to use power for good. Yeah,
well, there you go. And this is very much on theme. And I have to say, Ryan, that most of my philosophy about leadership emanates from this guy, Scott Gilbert. So he used to be my boss at Saatchi & Saatchi. And when I first went to work there, I didn't have any money, because when you're in advertising, when you first start out, you get paid nothing. And I've never been a credit person. I've never had a credit card balance my whole life. I just am not like that. So everybody else is walking around with fancy clothes, and I was not. I looked pretty bad. And he, God bless him, I didn't work for him at the time. And he pulls me aside and he says, you look terrible. So do yourself a favor. I want you to go out. I want you to buy a couple of suits, and don't go to some garbage place. I want you to go to a nice place. Go to Nordstrom. Get a couple of good suits, okay? And I will help you pay for them. We're going to expense them as client meals, okay?
Expense them as client meals. I remember that part of the story. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
It gets better.
So, which is playing fast and loose with the rules, right? Because that's a tax deduction. So if that's BS, you're breaking the tax laws.
Yeah, that's bad.
So
it's bad.
Right. So I go out and I get these really nice suits. I got a Glen Plaid Ralph Lauren suit, and I got this beautiful black suit, which, I met my wife and I was wearing one of those suits, and it looked snappy. Well, I found out that, he, in fact, hadn't expensed them through meals. He had just paid for them out of his own pocket. And I didn't work for him. And I felt like $1 million in those things. When I found out that he paid for those things, I said to myself, I got to go work for this guy. And so I'm lining up all the pawns to see if I can get hired. And he hired me to work for him. And over the course of the time that I worked for him, I noticed that all around him, he was helping people along with their skill sets and trying to improve them. And what happened with me was I eventually earned a promotion. So he gave me a promotion and he gave me a big raise, but he didn't tell me. He knew my wife because I met her at work. So he knew who she was. So he called my house and he told her so she could tell me about the promotion and about the raise. And, I got home and that was a great night. That's like winning an Olympic gold medal. And so I got back to work the next day. He's like, well, anything special happened last night? How'd that go? And so he knows perfectly well. But it was the fact that he took such joy in my pleasure that I go, oh my God, that's his superpower. He is his whole world revolves around him trying to make his people's job awesome. Like that was the way he looked at power. Was if you're gonna have it, you use it to make your employees have a good career. And so he would coach people, and they would get promoted right out into other bosses and promote, and they would leave and go to other companies. And it didn't matter, because all of us, as we went out to the four winds, everybody, you asked them, who's best boss, and they would all say him. And we frequently will go back and reminisce with him. And he was teaching at a community college in Aspen, Colorado, and we would used to go back up. He would have this murderer's row of people that would come in to teach classes for him, to come in and do a consult. Sure. And I mean, I'm telling you, these are hitters, like big hitters, all from the ad world, coming in, teaching at a small community college in Colorado. It's funny. It's like, it's like a small bowling alley, and every day people from, the best of the world come in there and pay their respects.
I just love it. Power gets a bad rap, and it shouldn't, because I think the way that we view it and the way that we use it should change, or the way that you should think about it should change. And that is, if you're able to acquire some power through hard work and effort and performance, let's use that power for good. One of the lines from that video is, the thing that gave him more joy than anything was using power to make life more amazing for his team, make you feel like you mattered to him. And there's a quote from Rick Lentz that you also put up, which I love how you end the videos. All business is personal. The best business is very personal. And to me, the best bosses, the best coaches, the best teachers, the best leaders that I've ever worked for and been lucky to be around, everything was personal. They never said, just business, man. Sorry, just business. That's not a thing. It is a thing usually with bad bosses. Great bosses, it's not how it works. All business is personal, because you're a person. I'm a person. We work together. We're people. I don't like that phrase, just business, man. And I know people still say it, and they'll say it forever. That is not something that I could ever fathom saying to somebody else. If there's bad news I got to give them, I'll give them the bad news, right? I'm not going to say, though, sorry, man, it's just business, right? Because all business is personal, and the best business is very personal.
Yeah, we're human beings.
Yeah.
We're human beings. We are complicated cocktails of competing interests and impulses that sometimes contradict each other. And we're all wandering through life without an owner's manual. And I have never understood the instinct to treat people as though they are nothing more than a tool to be used. But I can't count myself as a grand success in the world. I'm nobody important. And I've known some people that were very successful, that had this attitude of, friendship is not for work. We're not friends here. I just don't understand that impulse, but some people really are on the spectrum of sociopathy. Some people really are sociopaths. They just don't give a shit about other people.
Yeah. So let's go to tactical stuff again. So for that person who self-identifies as this is not a strength, okay, and they have a meeting coming up next Monday, what are the first, few bullet points of things for them to think about, to put into motion? I don't expect them to become experts after listening to this, but I want them to have some action, some thoughts, some things, whether it's a thought process or exercises, whatever it may be, so that once put into play, they do start the process of becoming better. I love the Whitney Houston story, right? The punchline one is something for all of us. I know I messed this up. So thinking about how to fix that, but what are some other things people could implement to get better at this right now?
Yeah, so I think that one of the first things that people need to recognize is that if they intend to make a presentation using a deck, and they're putting bullet points on the screen, you have to be very, very mindful not to put too many bullets. And what's more, I don't often recommend bullets at all,
right?
Because what happens is that you start to think of the presentation, you start to think of it this way, that your obligation is to dump data on people. You think that because you said everything you came to say, that they took away everything that they were intended to take away. But that's just not how things work.
Yep.
People are no more capable of walking away with all your bullet points than they are of having memorized a memo after having read it once. So you can't think of your information as that your obligation is to pass along information. What you have to start with is, how much can I expect them to absorb today? And what are the three most important things that they must remember when they leave here? And I will tell you that in order for them to remember anything, it should be attached to an emotion. There are two parts of the brain when it comes to memories. There's the hippocampus and there's the amygdala. The hippocampus, which is where we take in things like logical facts and bullet points, the hippocampus is staggeringly good at sorting and discarding information. It cannot take in everything, so it decides on what are the priority points and it rejects the rest. But again, it's very short term. You give people bullet points, they might remember for a minute, and then it's gone forever into the sands of time. As opposed to, I'll give you a story about this. So my friend Werner was this Swiss art director, fantastic. And he had this, this accent. He was like, German Wehrmacht officer. And one day, one of the clients at a big meeting for Toyota, we got up and one of the clients was showing off a newspaper ad that had been done for a car that was being leased for $199 a month. And this person who was presenting the ad, they had nothing to do with its creation, and they don't know anything about it, except that they're just informing the audience that this will be among the pieces of media. Well, one of these very, very wealthy car dealers, not at all shy, says, I don't understand why you guys make that $199 a month headline so damn small. Boy, that is a great price, and it ought to be as big as the width of the paper will stand. I just don't understand what the hell. Why do you feel like you got to whisper that number? And now the person who's showing off the work, he doesn't know the first thing about why it is. So he hems and haws a little bit, and he just wants to get out of there, right? Well, but before he sits down, the art director who had directed it, this guy Werner, he goes, if I may be permitted, I can explain precisely why the headline is the size that it is. Okay, so the clients are like, oh, no. And this guy goes, yeah, okay. And he says, I noticed on your wrist, there was a Rolex Yachtmaster watch. And at the time, this thing must have cost about $40,000. He goes, it's approximately $40,000. For $19, you could just as easily have bought a swatch. It would tell you when your next tea time was, probably with more accuracy. And yet, you didn't buy a swatch, did you? No, nor did you have a big clock around your neck, like Flavor Flav, broadcasting to the world what time it is. No, you chose a very expensive, very tasteful device designed by people who have spent entire lives studying how to do it. They are broadcasting on your behalf a sense of potency, taste, power, restraint. All of these things are vastly more important than the $199 a month. They can easily find that information off of Google in approximately 34 seconds. I don't need to tell you what the price is. What I need to do is broadcast your potency, your power, your restraint, your desirability. And this is because there are two parts of the mind where the information is taken in. The hippocampus, it takes in data like $199 a month. It discards it immediately as not important. But on the other hand, when you show all of these proper things with art direction and restraint and aesthetics, it is absorbed to the amygdala, the emotional center. I'll give you an example. Tomorrow, we'll be walking down the street. You'll see me coming. You won't remember what I said, but you will remember that I'm a know-it-all asshole. And that is why the headline is the size that it is. Okay, so this guy blinks, and then he goes, that's all I wanted to know. Now, there's an epilogue. All right, you ready for this?
Yeah.
I was at a meeting where that dealer was there, and they presented the same ad to a different group of dealers. And somebody else said a very similar remark to his, like, I don't get why that, you should make that headline bigger. And he goes, hang on a minute. He says, look, Daryl, it's the hippocampus and the amygdala, and I don't have time to explain it to you, but just know this. in the time it takes me to finish my sentence, I will have sold more cars than you sell all month. So do me a favor, just get out of the sandbox and let the kids play. So what I love about that is the acknowledgement that, yeah, it's kind of not the bullet points. That's not what's important. What's important are what are the symbols and the signals that you're sending? What are the stories that you can tell in order to impart a sense of emotion, a sense of meaning attached to this? And as long as we're on this theme, and we're going to try and trying to equip people with a couple of tips so that they can go into their meetings a new way. I'd like to suggest that it's really, really important. The first words out of your mouth should not be taken lightly. Don't do any, of that throat clearing that people do, which is like, well, we're so excited to be here. Or, thank you, Don, for that introduction. No, the first words out of your mouth need to be riveting. It has to be a story of some form or an interesting fact that they did not know that will influence the rest of what they see. And I'll give you an idea about why. Here's another reason why they should never say, we're so excited to be here. They don't realize that what that does is that cedes power. That gives up the power position. Because you have said essentially, oh, thank you for allowing us into your presence. No, if you're there to actually help them, to really deliver something that's useful to them, the first words out of your mouth should be along the lines of, if you knew this, you could do a lot with it. And get them to think, I want to hear the rest of this. Like the number one way I want to hear the rest of this is going to help you. I can help you make more money, make more friends. Like suppose, Brian, okay, so we're in a bar and one of our friends come in and without even saying hello, he says, I just found out a secret that will guarantee that when you leave this bar tonight, you will have a beautiful woman following you home. Like, okay, Ryan, you want to tell me more. Please continue. Whatever we were talking about, whatever piece of NFL BS or NBA, I don't care about that anymore. I'm interested in what you've got to say. Well, because, it's like, well, apparently he's got some hot information. Well, that's kind of the way that all business meetings are meant. You're supposed to show up and help people out. You're supposed to give them something useful. And if you don't have something useful you're delivering, what the hell are you doing there?
It is the most precious real estate, and it's wasted all the time. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I watch that and think, you just wasted it. And I've done this. Trust me, I've done this a lot. Where usually it stems from nerves, where I haven't prepared enough, versus the times when I am prepared and I know exactly how I'm going to open, and I'm not going slow. When I host these, I do these Neal, these leadership circle meetings, which essentially is 12 leaders from a variety of different industries. We meet on Zoom once a month. And we have exercises, and I host these things. I lead them. It's a paid service that I offer. And whenever somebody wanders in when it's their time to talk, I have to stop them. Nope. We're getting a rep. This is a live repetition, okay? You just messed up. Start over. Because we can practice together. That's what this leadership circle's for. But when you go to your meeting and you're an SVP and in charge of $850 million business, none of that. We're not wasting reps. We're not wandering. We're starting with substance. So everybody else knows now when it's your turn, and everybody goes. When it's your turn, we're not wandering. We're not thanking you. Oh, man, that was a great – thanks, Ryan. This is great. No. That's not how it starts. Boom. We're going straight to it because it also separates you because almost nobody does that. So even if it's just that little aspect of storytelling in a meeting, this is something that you could change right now, and it will make a big difference in how you start. Like, actually practice it. Think of it. Say the words, right? Go ahead.
If you left your group, whoever's listening to this, listen to what Ryan's saying right now. He is dead right. The real estate at the beginning It's the most priceless real estate in the meeting. You can make it off of that. That will give you permission for the next 60 seconds. You've got them. Don't blow it. Rehearse that opening. I heard this terrific opening. It was in I can't remember the name of the movie, but Guy Pearce played this guy who he had created this company that made these cybernetic people. And the very first words out of his mouth at a TED conference in 2035 was, he starts with this and he says, no words except, he comes in and he says, T.E. Lawrence, eponymously of Arabia, but very much an Englishman, favored pinching a burning match between his fingers to put it out. When asked by his friend William Potter, secret to this trick, how he managed to extinguish the flame so thoroughly and yet not hurt himself whatsoever, T.E. Lawrence just smiled and said, Potter, the trick is not minding it hurts. Okay, and then he goes on, but here's what's so great about that. He hit the ground running in such a way that you can picture the man pinching the match. You can sense the curiosity of his friend William Potter. That's your curiosity. How do you do that without hurting yourself? And the answer is so deliciously paradoxical. The trick is not minding it hurts. We could go any number of ways right now. I could go into a thing about the discipline of accepting the price in order to achieve something, or I could go off into stamina. I could go in a number of ways, but I've got you for the next 60 seconds. You want to know why I told you that story? Where does this figure in? And so, yeah, everybody should really give some thought to opening with some kind of and if you can, create an environment, which is, a friend of mine and I were walking along the Seattle waterfront, and Seattle is not a sunny city. It was raining, it was awful, it was dank, but we were determined to get a picture of the Pike Street Market thing, because that's what all tourists do. They take a picture of that. Along comes this homeless guy. We can tell he's homeless. He's doing his best to hide the fact that he's a little down at the heels, but he offers to take our picture instead of us having to do it. So that way we can both be in the picture. So we say, okay, that son of a bitch turned in 25 of the most beautiful shots you've ever seen. He was manipulating the cameras, putting filters on it, doing a panorama shot. He made Seattle look like Lord of the Rings. Okay. Now, as I'm telling that story, you've got a very vivid image in your mind about what's happening. And those are the best tales, is that give me a setting.
Start with some movement. You're literally moving, starting with, we are going where, you know what I mean? And I think those things are key. Earlier in the conversation, Neal, you said, I'm in the business of persuasion. And you have been, I think, for your whole career, and your stories they persuade me. I think they bring people, including me, to tears at times, because there's some really emotional ones. You use music really well, which can persuade people. It can really play on emotion. What are some thoughts that you have to be, I know this is high level, but I think it's important, because who doesn't want to be more persuasive?
Yeah, sure.
What are some ideas, mindsets, thought processes on how to be more persuasive?
And you ask all the best questions. I'm not kidding. I mean, I'm not blowing smoke. You ask the best questions. Okay, so let's dig into it. And this is 10,000 hours of work on this. You will have much better luck persuading someone to accept your point of view if you are willing to change your mind. If you go into a conversation willing to listen, being open to changing your mind, that will send both overt and subconscious signals that the other person has permission to do the same. And I am telling you, that works wonders. And it changes your body language. It changes your attitude. And you know why? Because you're not there to win anymore. You're there to enjoy somebody else's company and have a legitimate conversation about, you may find out that you don't have the solution to their problems. All right, well, in Thomas Edison's word, well, if you would think of that as a failure, that's not a failure. That is a success at finding out what doesn't work. So that's my number one, is be willing to change your mind, and you will open the possibility that they could change their mind. That's one thing. Second is the power of listening is so vastly underestimated. Everybody's favorite subject is themselves. And the more you give them the opportunity to tell you about them, the more you'll know about what does and doesn't matter to them, and in what ways you might or might not be able to help them. A really good listener is a tremendously powerful thing. And true story, when I was working at TiVo as head of creative marketing, we shot some commercials with Tim Tebow. And whatever you think about Tim Tebow, either good or bad, I guarantee you were not aware of just how charismatic he is in person. And it's not a matter of his physicality, although the guy's a beast. I mean, he was an Adonis. I have some pretty funny stories about that, actually, because when we were shooting the commercials, it was with a bunch of kid actors whose parents came to the shoot. And let me tell you, Ryan, the women were, the moms were lining up. But Tim had this wonderful quality where, in spite of all of the distractions and all of the demands on his time and all of the people trying to get his attention, when you were talking to Tim Tebow, he was looking right into your eyes. I don't think it's exaggerating to say he was interested in what you had to say. And it wasn't just me. It was everybody. He was very sweet with people. If you were talking to him, he was talking to you. He was a good listener, and he was intent on making sure you knew he was valuing what you had to say. Oh my God, Ryan, so powerful. So overwhelmingly, you walked away and you go, whether I agree with Tim Tebow 100% or not is of no consequence to me now. All I know is I'm a fan, and the more time I spend with that guy, the better off I'm going to be. And it was because of that talent he had for making you feel listened to. It's fantastic.
It's odd that that's rare, right? I think you mentioned it is, but you mentioned Bill Clinton, and I know he has a knack for doing that as well.
Yeah, he's good at that too.
I've read stories about that, and I've actually met Tebow, and have experienced his curiosity, which I'm not gonna lie, I was a little surprised. I'm like, why would he care about what I'm doing? But he did.
He's legit. He's legit curious about people.
Genuinely seem to, and I think curiosity, because I believe curiosity is on the other end of the spectrum from judgment. Not many people want to hang around judgmental people, but I know I love hanging around curious people.
Yeah,
because they're open-minded, they're striving to learn, they're asking good questions, they ask even better follow-up questions, which proves you're a good listener. And I think those are isn't this the type of people that we want to become, the type of people that we want to be? If we want to be leaders and we want people to want to follow in whatever direction we're going to try to help accomplish this hard thing that we may be doing as leaders, this is what we need to be. This is what we need to do, and we can work on it. These are skills you can work on. Now, you do have to genuinely care, and it can't be fake. As you mentioned before, this has to be genuine and authentic. And if it's not, then it's not going to work. But I think having this kind of fascination with people and their stories and caring about them and being a good listener, I mean, that's how you get people to commit to you and commit to whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Those are the qualities. And from a persuasion, I love that this is where you went from a persuasion question, because you didn't talk about any tactics. They really were about being a good, quality, curious, thoughtful human being who cares to listen, right? It's amazing how effective that is.
There's a let me break it down almost from a mathematical standpoint about why it's so effective, which is people don't change their minds unless they want to change their minds. Why would they want to? If you're just trying to sell them something or get over on them, they don't trust you. There's something a little too slick about you. And this is why I don't think people give themselves enough credit for their presentation skills if they don't think they're slick. They think that their job in getting to be a good presenter is to be slick or professional, right? To be flawless and so forth. Nope. Your job is not to make a presentation. Your job is to change somebody's mind. And in order for them to do that, they have to want to change them. Nobody changes their mind unless they want to. That's just, right? You can confront them with facts all day long. Doesn't mean a thing if they don't want to be persuaded. How do you persuade someone to want to change their mind? By being a human being and by caring what happens to them. If they, this is unfortunately too glib, but it is so true. People don't care what you think until they think you care. I wish it weren't that easily packaged, but that's it in a nutshell. Is that the more you demonstrate to them, you care about them, you're interested in them, you want to help them, the more likely they are to give you their money to manage, right?
Yes.
Right? So I find that's why I say to be a good listener is to be a persuasive person, to not worry about the bullet points, to give, and this is another thing about actually caring about people. If you really care about those people in the audience, then you will care what they take away. You will care that they walk out of there with something that will be useful to them. So you gotta give them every opportunity to grab hold of it and remember it. And don't be afraid to repeat stuff. If you really want them to leave, give them a little mnemonic and I don't necessarily mean an acronym like it's ACEs and it means blah and blah, blah, blah. No, I don't mean like that. I mean like stories really are fundamentally in our genetics. Stories are how we create a mental map of what happened and what it means. And the Tim Tebow point that I was making earlier about him paying attention, people will remember that. They will remember that about Tim Tebow. They'll see a picture of him, they'll look into those eyes and go, yeah, I could see that. And I'll give you another example of how you don't have to be a slick presenter. Okay, so imagine this, Ryan. True story. 12 businesswomen. These are all very successful business gals. They're in a room. They're about to hear a sales pitch. The salesman gets introduced, stands up in front of the room, clearly nervous. I mean, really nervous. Pulls his speech out of his pocket, reads it word for word from the paper, looking up only once. At the end of his speech, doesn't give him a call to action, doesn't say a price, just sits down. Now, from that description, it would be reasonable to expect that he sold 0 units of whatever he came to say. Oh no, but that's not what happened. Sold out his inventory. And on top of that, a few of the women went out of their way to tell him what a wonderful presentation it was. Now, the presenter, the salesman, was 7 years old, and he was selling cookies that he and his sister had baked so that they could go to summer camp. All right, which is kind of my point about people have to want for you to succeed in order for them to buy from you. No, those women don't need those cookies, right? In fact, they probably, half of them didn't even pick them up afterwards. What they're doing is they've got another agenda.
Yeah.
Right. It's satisfying a different itch. And so for anybody that is worried about how slick the presentation is, if you think about that kid, if that presentation had been slick, it would have been creepy.
Yeah.
It would have had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
But instead, they're responding emotionally to someone who they want to help. And when people feel like that their presentation is a little rough around the edges, it's like, fuck it, man. Okay, that's not what's important here. Don't worry about that. Yep. If it's rough around the edges or you say too many times, that is not a disaster. What's vastly more important is just follow a few of those really important things. Like make sure you know what it is you want them to walk away with, and don't be afraid to hammer it. And hammer it a couple of different ways. And don't blow the most pricey real estate of the presentation, which is those first few seconds. Nail that with something really fun and compelling. You get a good run up, you get some momentum after that first 15 seconds, you'll forget your stage fright.
Speaking of that, are you okay if I give you a bit of coaching right now?
Lay it on me.
You have started a couple stories by saying, true story, true story. You do not need to ever do that. I trust you. I believe you. And sometimes saying true story actually creates doubt in the mind of the person. So I've done this. Obviously, I do this too. But I think given how good you are and how much trust, and I know how genuine you are, you never need to say true story. I know it's a true story. And if it's not a true story, I don't care. It's a good story. I'm still going to learn from it. Who cares? So you know what I'm saying? I'm not, I think it's more selfish for me to be thinking this in my mind and not saying it to you. Because it's the harder thing to do that, because it's at a risk of you saying like, who the hell do you think you are?
No, I'm quite grateful. I'll tell you the background behind why I was.
Please tell me. Yeah, please do.
Which is on TikTok. I get the most marvelous comments, but every once in a while, somebody will say, like, that didn't happen. I'm like, oh no, it did. I was there, and so that stung me a little bit, and so
I got you. I would say,
but I take your point. It's like saying no. To be honest,
right? Correct. The people who say that on TikTok, though, I mean, I think they're best left ignored. I believe you. I bet most of your followers, you have hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok who love your stuff. I'm sure they believe you. And by the way, if you made up some of the stories, I honestly don't really care, because I'm still learning. And there's a great point in them. So even if that is the case, but I wasn't trying to sidetrack this thing. I just thought I would say that. I can edit this part out if you want me to.
I appreciate that.
I'm a massive fan, man. I really am. And I appreciate, this is, if you're cool with it, I don't normally do this, but if you're cool with it, I would love to maybe set regular times for us to talk, because I think it'll make me a lot better, and we can record them, whatever we want to do, because it'll make me a lot better at a skill that I think is one of the most important aspects of being a leader, and that's effective communication and storytelling. So I love this, man. Where would you send my listeners and viewers to learn more about you online?
Well, at the moment, I'm rebuilding my website. It's called passionatelogic.com, but it's going to take some doing to get it up. It'll probably not be up until the end of this week.
That's fine. We're not publishing this immediately.
Okay, well then, passionatelogic.com.
Okay.
And also they can find me on YouTube and TikTok. And I'm easy, because if you could just spell my name right, Neal Foard. The beauty is that I'm the only one in the world who spells my name that way. So it's like Neal Foard at Yahoo, Neal Foard at Gmail, Neal Foard, and they'll find me.
You got it.
And so there you go. And I appreciate the shout out there. That helps.
Of course. And I urge people, if you're on TikTok, to go check it out, because there's a lot of negativity around social media, but I think that's usually a user error. If you're finding too much of that, if you follow people like Neal and others, you can really learn a lot, and it can create emotion that can create change, and it will make you better. And certainly your work does that, man. That's why I reached out to you and asked you to do this, and I'd like to certainly continue our dialogue as we both progress, man.
Right on.
Thanks, man.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, Ryan. Take care.